The next talk, the last talk of this panel, with Jenny Siung, who is going to be talking about the educational side much more even of this aspect of work that we need to do, talking about, she's an award-winning head of education at the Chester Beatty Library and a specialist in intercultural dialogue, and she'll be talking about some of those pilot initiatives that you've been developing in order to understand cultural diversity in the Irish classroom and museums, also working with educational partners in the formal education sector partnerships. I'm going to hand over to you. I think we need to bring the next slideshow up. Okay, this is yours, right? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to the conference organisers as well. And I'm going to go back to the start. Okay. So this morning I'm going to briefly talk about the Chester Beatty and its role in developing its own learning programme, particularly looking at Irish cultural identity through museum learning. Chester Beatty is a museum based in Dublin, in Dublin Castle, and it relocated from Shrewsbury Road. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Shrewsbury Road when it was there. I think we had 6,000 visitors at the end of 1998. That's changed dramatically. Now, bar COVID, I think we had 350,000 visitors pre-COVID, on an annual basis. So the change in its life changed very, very dramatically. But with redesign of exhibitions, and for an Irish museum, and I'm talking about the Republic of Ireland, we have, I suppose, reflecting in the collections, the sacred traditions of our Islamic, East Asian and European collections, and then the arts of the book, through those three same collections. But traditionally speaking, Irish cultural identity has a tendency to be the stereotype is a tendency to be associated with Roman Catholicism. We have had a history of migration, poverty, and the Great Hunger of 1845 to 52. And of course, as a national language, it was replaced under the British Empire by the English language. But if we're going to zip up to the 21st century, that has changed a lot in terms of now we have 182 languages spoken in Ireland, which is a phenomenal change. And why is that? And I suppose it's because of the migration to Ireland rather than us leaving the island to live and work elsewhere. And the population itself, 5.1 million. And then I suppose the CSO, we just had our recent CSO on the 3rd of April, so we'll soon have more updated stats to the ones that I have here on the screen. Roman Catholicism still is the dominant faith, but there has been a significant rise in the more non-Catholic, so in the Orthodox, the Pentecostal and Apostolic, and then a significant number of Muslim faith and Hindus and a small percentage of Buddhists. So it has changed a lot, even from, I suppose, the time I joined the Chester Beatty in 2000. But because my work does evolve around learning and engagement and education, and the purpose of this presentation is to look at where Ireland was at pre-1922 in terms of its development and formation of the education system. The Irish National System of Education was established in 1831. And that was primarily, I mentioned poverty earlier on, that was to counteract poverty, but also to address illiteracy and to have a future generation of educated people. Because there was an absence of middle class, the Catholic Church did play a role in the education of Catholic children and hedge schools. And you will find, if you travel around the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland, you will find signposts to hedge schools where children were educated, and in the Republic as well. And really, what was the purpose of the education system under the British Empire pre-1922? And this is an interesting quote from T. Walsh in a paper of 2016. He was looking at the purpose of the education was an agent of civilization, socialization, assimilation, politicization, and reproduction of colonial values, making Ireland more governable. And that's an interesting point as well. But post-1922, with independence of the Irish Free State, the church and state were very much hand in hand in the formation of the education system right up until the end of the 20th century. And they were the moral and political authority. And I don't know if any of you would have been educated by nuns or priests, but I definitely remember having nuns through my education system. But also, you know, the kind of the late part of the 19th century, right across Europe, there was a rise of nationalism, but also that sense of reclaiming lost identity, particularly in Ireland with the establishment of the Gaelic Athletic Association and the Gaelic League, and with the formation of the education system post-1922, there was this desire to return to a Gaelic Ireland, and that was reflected in the education system. But if you met most people in the Republic, I'd say the majority don't have a very good handle of the Irish language because it's not taught very well, but it is a beautiful language. I've got these key dates as well, 1926, 1971, 1999 and 2022, and they reflect the reform of our education system in primary and post-primary schools. You'll see here as well, the ownership of primary schools in the Republic of Ireland really still are under the patronage of the religious denominations. And 90% of these are owned and under the patronage of the Catholic Church. But there is a shift, and from the 1990s, so I mentioned 1971, and 1926 was the first kind of establishment of our education system. 1971 was the next reformation, or reform, I should say, of our Irish education system, where they placed emphasis, rather than from the national identity and the Irish language, which is still present, to a focus on the child in the classroom, and encouraging to maintain presence post, I suppose, the age of 15. So, you know, to counteract early school leaving. 1999 was the next date I mentioned. And so around the 1990s, there was I suppose, a change in the Irish ethos of moving away from the dominance of the Roman Catholic Church to people having no faith or people having multi-faith. And I mentioned those in the stats. And so a number of multi-denominational schools have sprung up in the 1990s. So today, there are 164 primary and post-primary multi-denominational schools, so that they don't have that Roman Catholic ethos. Now, our Minister for Education, Norma Foley, she's got a target. By 2030, they're going to try and have 400 primary multi-denominational schools. And what I read recently is only one has left to become a multi-denominational school this year. So there is a bit of a struggle. But that being said, because our population has changed due to migration, there seems to be very little homegrown learning resources to support, let's say, interfaith and intercultural dialogue. And most of those materials are coming from the UK and the USA. And also continuous professional development, there seems to be, again, very little around. I'm referring to interfaith dialogue because faith is something that's very common and very prevalent in both the Republic and Northern Ireland. So, post 1922, I did mention that the Irish curriculum was designed to reflect national culture, Irish identity and Irish language. And during that period of nation building, it was within a post-colonial context. And I mentioned already 1971 to 99, the opening of the curriculum and the multi-denominational schools. The subjects tend to be written from a very Western European perspective, around the subjects such as maths, history, geography, and art. But what's changing now is the subjects are beginning to reflect slowly the cultural diversity in the classrooms. So you'll find this year, in 2022, there was a call for, I suppose, feedback and input in the new reform of the primary school curriculum in the Republic. The junior cycle is also undergoing change, but the Leaving Cert, that's something now, that's a bit of an institution unto itself, because it's the exam year before one leaves secondary school. That is slow. But I found this quotation from a cousin of mine, Nicholas Angafuk. He's professor of education in the University of Ottawa. He and I both have similar migration backgrounds. Both of our families left southern China in the mid-19th century to move to British Guiana, which was known for its plantations. Both of our families worked as indentured labourers in the plantations in British Guiana, which is now known as Guyana. And he migrated from Guyana to Canada. My family left Canada in the 70s, but we both have had this experience of moving from one place to another. And the education system that we've both experienced is we've been taught how to appropriate while also learning how to forget our own autobiographical intellectual migrant history. Because my migrant history was never addressed in school, and what he's saying is the same. And so that shift that I mentioned earlier on has begun to be addressed in the Republic of Ireland with the Migrant Teachers Project in the Institute of Education in Marino. In 2017 it was established, and this is a screenshot from the Irish Times, because they have recognised that most teachers in the Republic of Ireland are still from white Irish backgrounds, and they're not really reflecting the cultural diversity in our classes. So what the Teachers Project is doing is it's helping teachers with a migrant background to find work in Irish schools. Because I don't know if some of you, teachers in the Republic of Ireland have to have Irish as a language. And not every migrant teacher is going to have Irish as a language to get into work. And what is also crucial is that students will benefit from teachers with a diverse background as well. And so that they're looking at the barriers that teachers face, and it's opening up pathways, career pathways, so that they will be able to access employment a lot easier. And there is a benefit, there's a, it's a positive benefit for both child and for teacher. And so this is where I suppose I've managed to segue into working with schools collaboratively because of our collections. The Education Department was established in January 2000 with one education officer, myself, but now that's changed. And we have 3 staff. There is 1 post open, which should be coming up soon, so just keep your eye out. We have a fantastic panel of volunteers and a public programme that explores our Islamic, East Asian, and European collections. And I suppose with COVID, it really pushed us to online engagement, but we're back on site as well. And we've done a number of pilot projects in schools, and we've actually quite a lot of European funded projects as well. Interfaith dialogue has been something that I have somehow accidentally fallen into. But if you look at our collections, we have Islamic, East Asian and European, and we've got a lot of faith-based materials in the collection. I met somebody from the Intercultural Education Services of the Education Authority in Northern Ireland at a launch of the intercultural, policy of the Department of Education in the Republic of Ireland in around 2013. And I stood up and I said, because there was very little acknowledgement of the role of museums in how it can support learning in schools in intercultural dialogue. And I stood up and said, look, we're here, we're a museum, we can work with you, why don't you work with us? And she spotted me across the way, and she came up to me afterwards and said, we need to work together. So that's how we've collaborated with the Intercultural Education Service of the Education Authority in Northern Ireland. They're a support service for teachers, Roma, travellers, parents in cultural diversity, both in the classroom and in the community. So we've looked at the 5 key faiths that are taught in the curriculum, both in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And we've got a learning resource, but we've also held CPD. And the image on my near side is a screenshot of teachers from Northern Ireland, from the Intercultural Education Services. For many, it was their first time coming to Dublin, but they're exploring the collections and object handling and looking at faiths through museum collections. We launched our first official schools program in March 2020, the 5th of March 2020, and it disappeared after that because of the you-know-what happened. But we've been trying to revive it. And so I suppose we're always keeping an eye on what's happening with the updates and the reform of the education curriculum, particularly in the junior cycle in the Republic of Ireland. Dublin is, host to Google, Apple, Facebook. They're looking for creative and critical workforces. And so the curriculum is I suppose, not just because of those multinationals, but they are looking at changing the way children are educated and looking at creativity and critical thinking. And so through our European projects, the Creative School and the 4Cs, we're looking at how teachers, how museum professionals can work together using museum collections in fostering creativity and critical thinking. And we're doing that through object-based handling, or object-based learning, I should say, both on-site and online. We just did our first pilot of online object-based learning, which is a methodology that's multisensory, but it's student-centered, and it gets them to explore objects through questioning. But if they can on site, now, I mean, obviously this child can't take the dragon robe out of the glass case, but seeing things up and close. And for like this child on the further side of the slide, she came in for one of our pilot tours at the end of 2019 from the Catholic community school. She hadn't used English that frequently or confidently in the class, and we found out afterwards. But as soon as she saw this dragon robe, she could not stop talking. And I had to kind of pull her back a bit because we have to give the other kids a bit of a chance here, you know. But because she's Chinese, she saw this Chinese dragon robe, she knew everything about it. She started speaking up. She got so excited. She even found, we all found out, because it was a peer-to-peer learning experience, she had a sewing case in her pocket, and she took it out and said, "This is what you use to make silk dragon robes." And the feedback we got afterwards was we didn't know much about, I can't remember her name, but we didn't know much about her. But we found out that she has a sewing kit and she knows a lot about dragon robes. So that's a lovely, lovely moment where children got to learn about each other through object-based learning. There's another methodology we're using just to break down those barriers, rather than a didactic approach where somebody's telling somebody else about the objects. We're using visual thinking strategies developed by two educators in MoMA, Abigail Housen and Philip Yenawayne, and it's visual thinking strategies. And again, it fosters and supports creative and critical thinking. They're three very simple questions, but they're actually really tough because I have a tendency to wander off and explore and get really excited when I'm working with children, but I have to pull myself back. It's quite a rigid structure. We kind of supplement it. We don't always stick to it because a lot of people want to have information about objects. But this is really about the learner as at the center, but also peer-to-peer learning, where collaboratively they will use these three key questions: what do you see, what makes you say that, and what else can you see? I know it sounds easy, believe me, I've just gone through the training program, it's tough. But when we were doing developing our intercultural schools program, we worked with the Intercultural Education Service of Northern Ireland, along with Maynooth and Mary Immaculate College and a colleague in the UK. We did a teacher training session up in the Discovery Centre of Loughney in Armagh, and we couldn't bring the collection with us, but we brought colour printouts, and we got teachers to come together, look at these objects. They didn't know what they were, but they had these three questions, and that's where the dialogue really, really took off. So there is knowledge there amongst teachers, amongst learners. It's just how to pull it out. And that broke down those barriers and that fear around, I don't know anything about museum collections, how could I possibly discuss this? I don't know anything about Hinduism, or Buddhism, or Islam, or Christianity. You break down those barriers by using those three key questions and supporting that period of exploration in the CPD. I know I'm running out of time, so it's around 2 minutes? 1 minute, oops, okay. We're working with the Junior Cycle Religious Education team of the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. So everything is very long, as you noticed, all these terms. But we're looking at the 5 key faiths in our collections, and we're targeting the curriculum itself that's undergoing change. I'm not going to read them out, but that's part of the curriculum for the junior cycle. So junior cycle, they're for students around the age of 14, 15 in the Republic. And so on our website, we have a dedicated page looking at our collections, supporting those key components of the new junior cycle curriculum in religious education. My colleagues on the team have told me that we're 10 years ahead of them. So things are slow, but it's happening. And then we've collaborated with an art teacher to create and this is all about collaboration and co-creation of learning resources for the art history Leaving Cert exam, and which tends to be European and Irish centred, but we're doing comparing and contrasting with our collections, just to give that holistic viewpoint. And last November, we did a CPD with teachers and members of our faith-based communities, albeit masked up and reduced to 25 people, but we have all the talks recorded. But what faith means to me in the Irish based context of our faith-based members, and getting teachers to handle objects and explore the collections through tours. And finally, the voice of the child, which is also very central to the curriculum reform in the Republic of Ireland. I know I can't play this, but if you look up RTE, this is Art Club, it's our national broadcasting company, and they came in last summer with a young teenager, Elaine, to explore paper. She loves manga, and her snapshot of her visit to the museum was broadcasted on the 25th of March on RTE. And she's of Irish Filipino, she's an Irish Filipino, but she had access, she was able to explore, and she got to share her findings on national TV. And that's just a really, really nice way of kind of rounding it all up, because the voice of the child is paramount in the Irish education curriculum. Thank you.